You're listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, episode number 70.
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey there, welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. I'm Jill Castle, your host, and you've tuned into a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of raising healthy ones inside and out. Today, I'm tackling the topic of feeding kids of divorce. Because when kids are living and operating in two different homes, feeding can get, well, messy. Here to help us navigate through the sometimes awkward, frustrating, and no doubt challenging reality of living in a different home, being in a different kitchen, eating different foods, and following different rules is Dr. Nancy Buck. Dr. Buck is the owner of Peaceful Parenting and the author of How to Be a Great Parent, Understanding Your Child's Wants and Needs, and the book, Why Do Kids Act That Way? Dr. Buck is a developmental psychologist, trainer, and educator, and most importantly, the mother of identical twin sons. Her work focuses on moving from external control parenting to internal control parenting and why it is more effective. She teaches parents the skills necessary to navigate the push-pull relationship between themselves and their children. And she certainly gives us many nuggets to ponder as we move through the topic of feeding kids of divorce. Quickly, some more resources related to this show you may want to listen to or read. Number one is Nancy's article called Parenting Together After You've Parted, and I'll include the link to that in the show notes. Another article is called Food Parenting, United, We Should Feed, and that's on my website, and I'll also include that link. And then there are 3 Nourished Child episodes that might be helpful to you. Number 10, How Play Therapy Can Help Your Child. The Nourished Child episode number 61, Feeding Rules That Help Kids Eat Better. And the last episode, number 69, 3 Statements That Will Improve Your Food Parenting. So you can find today's show notes with all the links I mentioned over at jillcastle.com/070, and that's 070 for episode number 70. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
You're in Colorado, right?
I am, yes.
A beautiful place to be in the summertime as we are recording this, and I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I found out about you through our U.S. News and World Report connection. I read an article that you wrote, and it really inspired the topic of feeding kids through divorce. I, in fact, have, encountered this situation many times just through the families that I work with. And when I read your article, I thought she would be the absolute perfect guest to have on to talk about this issue. So I'm super glad you're here.
I'm very excited to be here with you, Jill. You've got me thinking as well about how parenting and nutrition are an interesting topic to live with and to figure out together.
Yeah, well, I always say, feeding is a big job for families. They have to do it several times every single day. So
it's so true.
Now, you're a parenting expert, and I've already introduced you at the top of the show, but I always want to give my guests an opportunity to sort of speak and describe themselves. So tell us a little bit about yourself, but also your philosophy and parenting perspective.
And that's probably where I'll start, Jill. I'm an expert in something called choice theory psychology. And that may not be a psychology that many people are familiar with. Some people may be familiar with William Glasser. He's the founder of choice theory psychology. But whether you are or not doesn't matter because I am. But the idea is that as human beings, we are born with 5 psychological needs that drive us. Now, we have a bunch of biological needs that drive us. One is the drive for food. But we also have some psychological needs. And those needs are safety and security, which is related to survival, love and belonging, connection, power, and there's three kinds of power: power within, power with, and power over; fun, and freedom. And everything that we do from birth until death is an attempt to meet one or more of those basic needs. Children are born with these needs as well, but they're not born knowing how to follow these needs respectfully and responsibly. So my philosophy is that we as parents, our job is to teach our children how to meet these needs responsibly and respectfully. And so when a child misbehaves, the misbehavior is never the child's problem. The child's problem is there's something that she needs and wants and doesn't know how to get responsibly and respectfully. However, somebody has a problem with that child's misbehavior, and that somebody is usually a parent, a teacher, a relative. And what we try to do too often is to correct the child's behavior. We're going around about it really in the wrong direction. What we need to do is to help children learn how to get what they need and want responsibly, and then they will behave respectfully, responsibly. So that's it in a nutshell. However, it's in the living and practice of it, it gets way more complicated. But I think that everything, well, let me also say that there's an inherent conflict that starts pre-birth. Even if you adopted your children, they're not biological, there's still an inherent conflict between children and parents. Parents want to keep their kids safe. From the moment you find out you're pregnant, you immediately start thinking about, what did I eat, drink, smoke, not smoke? What have I been doing to take care of myself biologically to create a healthy environment for that baby to grow inside of me? When children come out, the last thing they're worried about is being safe. They can't wait to get out into the world to explore. So they're driven by freedom and fun and learning. So parents are doing everything they can to hold their child close to keep them safe, and kids are doing everything they can to break free. That's the inherent conflict. So our job as parents is to figure out how to keep our children safe while we teach them how to also be free in the world and stay safe. So again, in a very quick thumbnail sketch, that's the work that I do.
I love it. I'm sitting here nodding my head and smiling because I can't help but think about, I have 4 of my own children, 3 of which will be in college next year and 1 who's still in the nest. And I completely resonate with that. Yeah, it feels like my job, and I'm sure other people feel this way who are parents as well. It's my job to keep them safe and to nurture them through all the things that they need to learn. But boy, the fears spike whenever they are venturing out to an unknown place or participating in behavior that I feel might be dangerous or threatening to them. And their response is always, yes, I want to be free. I want to have fun. And this sounds like something I want to do.
Exactly. So that, really, it literally starts from the moment the child gets out. And that just continues to be the dance. And figuring out how to honor our children's desire to be in the world without us is what we need to do. But we doesn't mean you just, shove them out the front door and say, good luck, I hope it all works out. It's the continuous dance of, are you safe enough? Usually children are ready for more freedom before we're ready for them to be ready. That's not always true, but it's often true. So that's just part of it. And certainly eating and food is also part of that. We're born biologically with the urge for food. But how we how we get it, how we eat it, how we consume it, what we choose to consume, all of that is really the process of helping our children learn to responsibly and respectfully nurture their body nutritionally. So, kids may want unlimited lollipops, but it's not a good choice.
True. Very true. Now, I want to sort of kind of segue into the topic that we're going to talk about, which is how to feed kids through divorce. But before we get to those questions, I want to sort of touch on the individual history that a parent comes to the relationship with their children as parent. Can you sort of walk us through that? I know that I work with families and talk a lot about their feeding style and the way that they feed their children and how it is anchored in the way that they were fed as children and how they were raised. Is that something that is similar in the whole parenting journey?
It's exactly the same thing, Jill. So you as an individual have the experience of how you were parented. And that may have been with a mom and a dad, or it may have been with a mom and a stepmom and a dad and a stepdad, or whoever it is. That's your picture. That's your experience. That's the frame of reference that you have on how to parent. And years ago, when I first started this program, what I realized is my largest competitor is not another parenting program. My largest competitor is a person's own parents. Because usually people fall into one of two categories. They either want to repeat and replicate what their own parents did because they thought it was a good idea, or they say, I never want to do to my kids what my parents did to me. But often they don't know what else to do. So it's very much part of it. So now we'll just to make it easier in terms of conversation, we'll think about a woman who comes into the situation, the marriage, and she's now the parent, and she's thinking about how her mother mothered her, how her father fathered her. And now comes the husband, and he comes with his parents, his mother and his father. So now we have 6 parents who are involved in this situation. The present mother and father, and the maternal mother and father, and the paternal mother and father. So that all contributes to it. And usually this is not something that we're even aware of until something happens. And now we're making a decision about our kids' schooling, or we're making a decision about to breastfeed or not to breastfeed, or we're making a decision about whether or not, well, it goes beyond nutrition, but those are the ones that we're talking about here, whether or not we're going to be a meat-eating family or not. It's not just mom and dad's opinion. It's also the other 4 parents, mom's mom and dad, and dad's mom and dad, and their opinions and pictures of what's going on. So there may be, those old jokes, I guess they're probably still around, about a newlywed couple that fought over how you put the roll of toilet paper on the toilet paper holder, or how you squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube. All of that is based on a person's personal experience. And the same thing is true as they enter into a marriage. And now we add another human being, which is the child. And it gets really complicated.
Yeah, definitely. You explained that so well. And I think anybody out there who has kids and has, in-laws and their own parents, this will all resonate quite well with them. Now, when we are talking about families who might be separated or divorced, for example, what are some of the essential or fundamental requirements that need to be happening in order for that parent unit then to successfully parent their children?
So this is I think the thing that inspired your talking with me was based on the article that I wrote in U.S. News and World Report. The idea is, from my perspective, whether I decide to stay married to my husband or not involves my relationship with him. But my children are not choosing to divorce either parent. So the mom and dad need to figure out how to parent together, even if they're no longer married together. And this is usually extraordinarily difficult because it's not the only reason, but often one of the reasons that people get divorced is they haven't been able to work things out. So now we're asking them to, okay, you don't have to work out your love life and your married life, but you do need to work out how you're going to parent together. It's a really hard. I actually had a very small practice in Rhode Island before I moved to Colorado, which was coaching divorcing parents to peacefully parent even though they've parted. That's a lot of P's. But figuring out, how do we work it out even though we're no longer living together and parenting together? How do we support the other person in parenting our kids? The biggest favor, and that's an understatement, gift, that's a better word, you can give your child is not to belittle the other parent. It doesn't work. To yell at your kids that because of the way their father has been doing things doesn't help. It doesn't help the child. It doesn't change the father. And it doesn't help you, mother, have a better relationship with your children. Your job is to really, literally say nothing bad. If you don't have to support them, but you need to say nothing denigrating. It's also around food. Okay, here's the news. And you can give this with more expertise than I, Jill. And that is, if my kids are spending the weekend or the week or the month with their dad, my divorced ex, and he feeds them differently, it will not be the end of their nutritional life. It will not denigrate them. It will not harm them unless the other spouse is giving your children foods that they're allergic to. That's a whole different question. But if I choose to give my kids eat vegetarian, and they're with their dad, and he tends to be a meat and potato guy, the kids they'll manage that. They'll figure it out. They may say, oh, I like it better when I'm at dad's house, or I like it better when I'm at mom's house. And at some point in their lives, they'll be able to make that kind of choice and decision for themselves. But in the beginning, it's really not the end of the world. If the other parent feeds them differently, puts them to bed at a different time, their bath schedule is different, their homework time is different, it really is okay.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is underpinning the feeling by perhaps one of the parents that the other parent is sabotaging their efforts? Because one of the areas where I hear a lot of conversation about this topic in my own sort of circles of clients and families is particularly around healthy eating or around a child who might be carrying extra weight. And so the scenario sort of goes like this. The mom is trying to help the child eat healthier and be healthier, and the child goes to the father's for the weekend and eats junk, and the mom feels that the dad is sabotaging her efforts.
Yeah. So 2 things. 1, mom, it's none of your business. It's your business when your child is with you, and you can talk to your child about your child making the choices that the child might make to help the child feel better. But what dad serves the child when the child is with dad is none of your business, mom. But 2, and it's probably the bigger issue, it has nothing to do with food, Jill.
Right.
It has to do with mom and dad. Their difficulty in getting along. And they happen to be landing on the issue of children and food. That's the quote thing they're arguing over. And it's not the thing they're arguing over. It's just the topic at hand. But it really is not what it's about.
Good insight. Really good, Nancy. What are some of the common struggles children face when their parents split up?
Well, there's many. And again, many kids. So let's go back to the basic needs. Want to feel safe and secure. And that's the psychological component of the biological component of survival, which is why food is so important, because food is the biological expression of survival. But anyway, so the kid wants to feel safe and secure, and they also want to feel a sense of love and belonging. And when parents split up, that's a huge issue. Am I safe? What happens? The family fell apart. The family I thought I knew, I could recognize, I could count on, it's not here anymore. Am I still safe? Am I still loved? And so much of what you see in the beginning, and maybe for longer, because you can't ever predict how long grieving will occur, but how long it will be before the kid says, oh, it's different. I'm still safe. I'm still loved. It's just different. And that's essentially what you want, a kid who, quote, successfully maneuvers and gets to the point where they're managing life, able to meet their needs responsibly and respectfully, even though their parents are no longer living under the same household. Doesn't mean that they're not still feeling safe and secure and still loved. And our job as parents is to help our children manage through that. But at the same time, what's also happening for the 2 divorcing parents is rarely do they say, okay, we're going to respectfully do this with no harm, no foul. They're often a mess and a wreck, trying to figure it out. Even the spouse who said, I'm out of here, I'm ready to be done, they don't necessarily walk away whistling and feeling happy and free. Things are different. And they also go through mourning and grieving, the lost family, because what was the family is no longer the family. So how that is expressed is as different and as varied as there are children and their creative behaviors. Some will be very sad. Some might go find their comfort in food. Some might find their comfort in acting out. Some might find their comfort in sleeping a lot, in being very belligerent and unfriendly, unloving, critical. What was a kid who was involved in sports may give it all up. A kid who was a great student may give it all up. But I'm also expressing this, Jill, in a more exaggerated way. Usually it's not that big. It's more subtle than that. But the kids aren't going to be there. They're not going to be the same. That doesn't mean they'll never go back to being the same. It doesn't mean they'll never be okay. But in the beginning, they're not the same because nothing about their life is the same.
Does the age of the child when this happens, and I'm asking this personally because I am the child of divorced parents later in my teen years. And does the age of when this happens to a child, create a different outcome or?
Certainly. So a 3-month-old baby didn't have a whole lot of time to know what life was usually like to have life now be different. But that doesn't mean there isn't a change. There is, and the child will be aware of it. But what they're adjusting to, at 3 months, they're adjusting to the world out here compared to the way the life has been for the last 9 months of their life, which is, it's a pretty dramatic shift in that their life as they know it. But then toddler, at each age, it is different. And also part of that is because each age and stage has different developmental forces driving them. Generally speaking, in childhood, so from about age 8 months to about 10, the strongest needs driving them are fun and love. And when there's safety, but that doesn't mean that the power and freedom aren't important. Ever been around a terrible 2-year-old? The reason they're terrible is because they have a huge need for power and freedom, and you're not the boss of me. But during childhood, when their safety is threatened, they rely on love and belonging and fun to stay safe. In the teen years, what they rely on to feel safe, and it's a much stronger need for power and for freedom. So the advantage that you had, Jill, in being in your teenage years when your parents split up was you were less involved with them anyway. Now, that doesn't mean I don't mean to imply it was easy, because it's not easy. It's just that your life had involved way more in other things, and mom and dad were not the center of your universe anymore. But still, when they split up, the center of your universe exploded. And so that, I know, had an effect on you. How it had an effect on you, you know that more than I. And hopefully they managed so that they were reasonable people and didn't use you as the bargaining chip between them to figure out how they were going to manage getting beyond that upset of no longer being together.
Yeah, it was, I would say having it happen as a teenager sort of rocked that whole idea of what a, healthy, happy family was. But yeah, I think it does. I think it affects, I've had people say to me, oh, you were older, it wasn't a big deal. Well, it was a big deal. And I think it was a big deal for everybody in my family. And I have a special heart for children who go through this because I went through it. And even though my parents did not fight over food, and that wasn't an issue, and I think they did a good job of trying to hold themselves up and keep the family together. But the reality is it is a different family, and it became a different family. And those are, depending on each individual in the family, some more receptive to that change than others. I was not receptive to the change.
It's just flat. And it's not unusual. It is a huge, big deal. And especially as a teen. Look, I'm supposed to walk away from the family. You're not supposed to implode the family that I now can't walk away from. I mean, as a, your developmental milestone kind of a thing. It is a big deal. And to act as if it isn't, I think is disrespectful for all involved. Now, it doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to ruin everything for always and always. Again, I go back to my goal is to help parents help their children learn to meet their need for safety, love, power, fun, freedom. And do that respectfully and responsibly, and do that whether their parents decide to divorce, remarry, move to China, get a dog, all of it. How can we as individuals meet those needs, and how can we teach our children how to meet those needs? Because the world changes, but we still need to figure out how to do it. And it's harder when there's a dramatic change that was, quote, beyond our control.
I love networking. I'm part of a podcast network called Parents on Demand, or the Pod Network. We are a network of fun and educational podcasts perfect for your family. You can explore the shows in the network by going to parentsondemand.com and searching specific categories. Parents on Demand also has a download for a free network app on iOS and Android, so you can listen to your favorite shows or find new podcasts. Subscribe through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, or another provider. Every month, I will feature a podcast that I think will be helpful or of interest to you. Here's this month's podcast feature.
I'm Dr. Elliot Berlin, host of the Informed Pregnancy Podcast, where each week we interview experts, celebrities, new and expecting parents, and search for unbiased information on the most pressing topics for growing families. Check out our expansive and growing library on the Informed Pregnancy Podcast. We're on the Pod Network and all major podcast apps, or visit us online at informedpregnancy.com.
So getting back to sort of parenting food and feeding kids in two separate environments now. So we're talking again about the divorced family, and the children are experiencing food and eating in two separate environments. How would you advise parents to do this successfully?
So I would say that probably my advice is similar whether the parents decide to divorce or not. And that is, at some point, pretty early on, you're talking to your kids about food. What's your favorite food? Why do you like it? What's the food you hate? Are there colors that you like better? Are there textures that you like better? What's food that you know your friends eat that you've never heard of? Let's go to a market that has foods from a wide variety of countries. Just introduce the idea of food to your children. Now, again, you can spend your entire day doing that. It's okay with me. You can spend, at least one day a season doing that. But to begin to talk to your children about what do you eat? Why do you eat it? What's the purpose of eating? And these are the choices that your dad and I have made. These are the choices that your mom and I have made. And we ask that you respect it up to a certain point. At some point, we're going to begin to ask you, what do you choose? What do you want? And if that, now again, this is my ideal world, Jill. I don't know anybody who does it, but it's still my ideal world of how it could go. And so that when the child, again, the same thing's going to happen with your own kiddos when they go to college. And if they're going to move away from home, they're going to have to figure out how that they're going to maneuver their way around food. And are they eating in the school cafeteria? And what are the foods that they're going to offer? And what are the terrible foods that they're going to offer? And what are the foods that they're going to offer that taste really good, but give them their freshman 40? I don't know if we still call it that anymore, but so that at whatever point when mom and dad divorce, you still can have those same kinds of conversations. It's not new. It's just part of the conversation that we're going to have. Now, if the mom wants to have those conversations and dad doesn't, then the kid still is having the conversations just with mom, not with dad. And if dad starts introducing or eliminating foods that the kid likes, the kid may or may not speak up about it. And if they do, great. And if they don't, okay. The kid, again, they're not going to be, unless they're going to choose to live with one parent versus the other, they'll never have easy access to the foods they love as they used to.
But are you saying that should the parents try to work together to be aligned in the foods that they offer, or the schedule, the structure that they feed their kids on, or just have the respect for each other that it will be different?
The latter. I respect that again, I am a divorced woman. And when I divorced my ex, I knew that he was a person who loved and cared about his kids, and he would do what he thought was right in terms of providing for them, including their nutritional needs and how and what he fed. I didn't have anything to do with that. They were at a different house. Now, again, my kids were 18. Let it be said, I have identical twin sons, in case you're trying to work that out. But so at age 18, they were kind of eating what they wanted anyway. I learned during their teen years, this is just kind of an aside, but I'd say, what do you want for dinner? And they'd tell me. But they always wanted the most complicated thing. I didn't want to cook that much.
I'm doing an episode on whether you should ask your children what they want to eat, Nancy.
So I stopped asking because I knew what their answer was going to be. And there was also another time in our lives together when I said, I'm not going to buy, cook, or prepare meat anymore. You can, if you want, I'll help you buy it. You can go to the store with me. I'll pay for it. I'll help you learn how to prepare it. Boy, were they mad at me. They were furious with me. And it turned out at that time, it nutritionally didn't support me. So I didn't stay on what the boys called the dark side forever. But of course, now I've gone back to it. But anyway, so let me go all the way back to your question. At that age, I believed that they could manage for themselves and that their father was going to support what he needed to do to make sure that they were fed well. Would that have been, and I can also say, Jill, obviously my feelings towards him changed over time, but I believe that would have been true at any time in the boy's life because he was their dad. He was participating in helping provide for them, including nutritionally.
I think that this will be a refreshing perspective for a lot of parents who might be listening to this, because I think that there is, or what I see and sense is that there's a common feeling that both divorced parents need to be doing the exact same thing in two different environments.
So let me also introduce, have anybody got grandparents? So when you go to the grandparents' house for holidays, do you, parent, dictate what the grandparents going to put on the table? If you do, you got a different relationship with your in-laws than I did. There are many people who contribute to our children's nutritional lives. I remember when many years ago, my sister and her husband were going on a cruise. And so I took care of her two kids. So I had three 3-year-olds and a 1-year-old for 2 weeks. And that's when I said I was not going to be like you, Jill, and have 4 kids. I thought 2 was just a fine number. But I can also tell you that Katie, my niece, was particularly particular about her choices in food. People might have called her a picky eater, but I instead would say she was very clear about her preferences. And I did not make her preferences. I made what I was going to make for everybody. Now, that didn't mean that I completely ignored Katie's preferences. If I could, I'd work it out so that we would all enjoy what it was that Katie enjoyed. But I wasn't going to do that for every meal. I also had my elder nephews as well. So literally I had 6 kids, and I did the best I could, and the kids survived it. So Charlotte didn't say my sister didn't say you must feed Katie a certain way. No, here are my kids. Thanks for taking care of them for 2 weeks while I go on a cruise to Hawaii. But again, there's a sense of trust and goodwill. And that is probably the hardest part, parenting an ex-partner. Is there trust and goodwill between you? And that's what you need to foster. And if you do, then all those other questions, they still come forward, but hopefully you can lean back into, I trust him, I trust her, I have goodwill that they're going to do what's best for the kiddos.
So I want to throw a question out to you for my health professional posse out there that listens to this show. And these could be doctors, nurses, other dietitians who might be facing a similar scenario where they have, a divorced family that they're working with, and there is conflict in that parental relationship, overfeeding their children, what advice would you give a health professional to deal with that scenario within their practice?
Yeah, that's
I know it's not an easy question, because I mean, I've had situations where I've been with families and there is conflict, and, you know, they want me to meet with the dad and get the dad on board with the mom's feeding, or I've had families going to court and, you know, on the basis of, you know, food and feeding differences. And it can be quite stressful for a healthcare professional to, you know, get involved in those. And that's obviously an extreme sort of scenario. But in general, if, you know, you were coaching another health professional in terms of how to work with families who do have conflict and disagreement around feeding their children. I know I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to do therapy with parents like this. And I know I could refer out to a family therapist or something of that nature. And is that the best way to deal with something like that? Or are there other steps that a professional could sort of tap into?
So a couple of thoughts that I have. Let me also preface this by saying this is not the answer. It's just me thinking out loud as you pose the question to me. One of the things I know that choice theory teaches me, so choice theory psychology teaches me, is that I cannot control another human being. And the biggest error that every other human being makes, especially in relationships, is an attempt to control another human being. We can influence other human beings, but we cannot make them do what we want them to do. And ironically, usually the example I give, I'll give now. Have you ever tried to feed an infant who's no longer hungry? Tell me who wins. And the answer, of course, is the infant. Now, if you can get some more down their throat, okay, good for you. But wait a minute, they're going to throw it back up. You cannot control another human being. There's the illusion that we have that we can control another human being. So even as you tell me the question, Jill, and I know it's not your personal question, but it's a question you face. The question I would ask is, how successful have you been as a husband in controlling your wife? What makes you think you're going to be successful in controlling her now? And are you willing to sacrifice your child's, what's the right word? Good mental health would be one word I'd use, or sense of safety and contentment by continuing to attempt to control your former spouse? Because the reality also is, even if you take them to court, unless you're going to be there at the dinner table when the former spouse is feeding them, you can't control them. I mean, you know, we all understand that there are laws on what speed you're supposed to drive on the road. There's lots of people who are not controlled by that law. So that's the place that I would land. But I would also, I mean, and this, again, it may be too much of a therapy question, but the question I'd ask is, what is it that you want, that you're trying to get by making your former spouse do what you want him or her to do?
Yes, yes, yes. Nodding, smiling, yes.
And if we can figure out another way to help you get it, that's different from trying to control that person, are you willing to work it out? So, I mean, let's take it from a different perspective. Let's say that, and I'll do a stereotypical, a mom decides that one of the behavioral challenges that the child is having is because they have a sensitivity to dairy products. So the mom has decided that they're going to eliminate dairy products for the kid when he or she is at mom's house. But dad says that's all about a lot of malarkey, all that woo-woo stuff. Everybody's saying everybody's allergic to everything. That's just not going to be true. At my house, my kids can have dairy products. So dad serves dairy products, and then the kid comes and now has behavioral problems for the first 3 days of the week because they're trying to metabolize out the dairy products. That's a problem. It's a problem for mom, it's a problem for dad, and it's a problem for kiddo. So how are you going to work it out? Now, my recommendation would be you need to see a really good counselor who's going to work with you guys to figure out how you solve these problems in a respectful, responsible way. Unless you want to take that on, Jill, and I don't think that you should, but you might talk to dad about, look, one dairy product every 3 days is okay. But if you give the kid 3 dairy products a day for 3 days, that kid's now going to have a heck of a week getting off that dairy product because it really does affect their behavior. One of the ones that I had with one family, it was really clear. Every time the boy had soy milk, he peed the bed. Well, it was pretty clear he had a sensitivity to soy. Does he have an allergy? I don't know. I don't use those words because I'm not a nutritionist. But it was very clear. And that's when it got really clear. Okay, we're not going to give this kid soy anymore because he pees the bed every time. What else is he doing? Don't know. But that one was a pretty concrete, the cause and effect that could make a difference. But usually most parents, if the kid has anaphylaxis, they'll abide by that. But it's the sensitivity that makes it a wee bit harder. If you've got one parent saying, I believe this is part of what's going on here, and you have the other parents, they can still be together and still have that disagreement. It's a challenge.
Right. I see a lot of one parent being permissive and one being more controlling around food. So one, as I sort of mentioned before, being a little bit more prescriptive in the diet that their children eat and a little bit more routine. And then they go to the other parent's environment and that parent is more permissive, rewarding with treats and sweets and let's do this, let's do that. And it's all centered around food. And the former parent feels, that all of her efforts have been thrown under the bus and ruined and all of this stuff. And it could be really challenging.
It is. At the same time.
And frustrating.
Right. At the same time, what I would encourage parents to be, whichever parent you are, is to let it go. I'm raising my hand up like, what's her name in Frozen. Let it go and have faith will eventually work its way out. Because getting angry, upset, attempting to control the other that's not going to get you where you want to go either. Mm-hmm. If that worked, then we wouldn't see as many parents upset that we do. Because we flat out cannot control another human being.
And what ultimately is the cost to the child from that conflict, further conflict?
Because now not only does the child have conflict about the food, now they have conflict about appearing to choose sides between which parent they follow and love more. And that's just a hell of a thing to do for kids. That pretty much will. This is an unfair thing to say, but it could lead to eating disorders. That's for sure. Because the kid's so conflicted about it. So they won't eat at all or they'll overeat. But not every kid goes there either. But it certainly wouldn't be surprising if a kid did.
Right. It certainly is a possibility. Yeah, I agree. Well, Nancy, this is such good stuff. So many good nuggets of information. And I know that this will be an episode that will be very well received because I think there are a lot of parents out there. And even if they're not divorced parents, there might be parents out there who are in a marriage where there is conflict around food and feeding because of different philosophies, beliefs, approaches, histories. So I think that this is just full of great information. So I really thank you for sharing your expertise with us. How can my listeners find and connect with you?
Well, thank you, Jill, for giving the opportunity to chat. We could go on for days. I'm not trying to.
We could.
Have a good time.
We could.
I invite people to go to my website, which is drnancybuck.com. So it's DRNANCY, B as in boy, UCK.com. There's tons of information. I have a couple of 3 books that I've written that people are welcome to purchase that through my website as well if they're interested. I have lots of additional information that's in the website. I also would invite people to email me at Nancy at drnancybuck.com. I love questions. I am very much committed to helping parents better understand how to do the job, the very difficult job that they're doing. It's not easy being a parent. And it's not any easier for our generation, but it's not harder for our generation than other generations. Because even though we've got the internet, et cetera, to contend with, our grandparents had things like electricity to deal with. So
right.
There's some new technology that seems to be pulling apart relationships. But I certainly would invite anybody to contact me and ask questions or give feedback. I always love to hear from people.
And certainly people can find you over at U.S. News and World Report as well.
That's right. I'm monthly blog on parenting. And the one that I just wrote, I think, was helping our children figure out how to manage additional freedom. So it is hard. It's really, parenting is the best job we ever lose. If we do it right, they leave us. But if we do it really right, they invite us to come back, either to visit or to spend, live closer to us. But just when their kids are juicy, I'm sure you're right in the middle of it, Jill. When kids are juicy and interested is when they leave.
Yeah, I know. It's so sad. Well, it's sad and it's glad. It's both, really. Honestly, I feel personally so proud that they are ready to fly.
Exactly. It's a real definition of bittersweet. It's so sweet and it's so bitter all at the same time. But bittersweet's my favorite chocolate anyway. So
on that note, that's a good place. Thank you so much, Nancy, for being on the Nourished Child podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me, Jill. It's been fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Nourished Child. As a product of divorce myself and a professional who has worked with a number of families trying to figure this out in the most positive and beneficial way possible for their children, I know this reality around feeding can be a real grind and a real worry. Dr. Buck gave us a lot to think about on this issue. I'm curious, though, if you're in this situation, what has worked well for you and your co-parent? Let me know, and the rest of us too, over at jillcastle.com/070 or post your comments in the Nourished Child Facebook page. Do you love this show? Well, if you do, be sure you are subscribed to it on iTunes or Android. It's super easy to subscribe. Go to the podcast app on your iPhone or Android phone, click the search icon and type in The Nourished Child. You'll see the little logo, click on the logo, and then click on the subscribe button to the right. In addition to iTunes, you can find The Nourished Child on Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere you listen to podcast episodes. For more resources, articles, books, and programs on childhood nutrition and feeding, hop on over to my website, www.jillcastle.com. And you know I am as thrilled as I always am that you joined me today. Tuning in to this show is a positive step in educating yourself to be a better parent in the realm of nutrition and feeding. Be sure you give that child in your life, that super important person in your life, a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.